Okay, everyone. My name is Gregory Gale. I want to welcome you to our webinar. We're very excited about what we're going to be doing. And so what I'm going to do now is I'll be introducing our presenter, Dr. Scott Poland. I'm going to be giving you a synopsis of his bio, and then I'm going to be turning it over to Dr. Poland to give our presentation. So without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Scott Poland. Dr. Poland is a professor in the College of Psychology at Nova Southeastern University. He's a nationally recognized expert on school crisis, youth violence, suicide intervention, self-injury, school safety, threat assessment, parenting, and the delivery of psychological services in schools. He's lectured and written extensively on these topics. He's appeared on all major television networks and has presented over 1,000 workshops in every state and numerous foreign countries. He served on the President's Roundtable on Youth Violence and has testified about the needs of children before the U.S. Congress on 4 occasions. He's also the past president of the National Association of School Psychologists and was the director of psychological services for a large Texas school district that received numerous state and national awards for its exemplary psychological services. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Scott Poland. Dr. Poland?
Thank you very much, Gregory. And it's indeed my great pleasure to have a chance to talk with everybody today about a really important topic, suicide prevention, especially with regards to our young people and our schools. Somehow I doubt that I'm the only one listening that lost a loved one to suicide. For me, that was my father 42 years ago. I'm not here to talk about him. I'm here to talk about what can we do to prevent suicides among young people. Disturbing national figures that came out recently indicated that suicide has now passed car accidents as the leading cause of death for middle schoolers in this country. Suicide is now the second leading cause of death for all adolescents in this country. And you know, one of the things, there was a conference held a very long time ago that basically identified, way back in the year 1910, a conference hosted by Sigmund Freud indicated that statistics are alarming, but they're always 1 or 2 years behind. The media may be sensationalizing and contributing to this problem. Clusters of suicides are occurring. Schools, the logical place to intervene. Students are under extreme pressure. Guns are far too available. And you know, I think that these are all problems and concerns in 2016. And I would say I'm not sure that we have really progressed that much about preventing youth suicide around the world and in our country. If I was listening today, I'd want to know what works. According to the World Health Organization, we need to remove the lethal means. #1 method of suicide in America is a gun. And I'm not here today to question any adult's right to own a gun, simply to say with that right comes responsibility to safeguard that gun from a depressed, substance-abusing, maybe even mentally ill person who might reside in your very own home. And we have to figure out ways to interrupt and disrupt the trauma and abuse that many young people sadly have experienced. The next important worldwide recommendation is to educate physicians and get them more involved. Literature says clearly that about 70% of the time the young person or the person of any age that died by suicide actually went to see the physician shortly before they ended their life. And training and awareness and confidence and intervention is absolutely critical for all of our physicians. Let me quote our Surgeon General for a moment. More than 42,000 suicides a year in America. We got to talk about it more in our homes, our schools, and in our churches. We should never be afraid to ask someone if they're feeling hopeless, thinking about giving up, thinking about dying by suicide. The most pronounced myth that has held back suicide prevention in this country is the idea that if we bring it up, somehow it will happen. Nothing could be further from the truth. We actually give the depressed person a chance to unburden themselves and learn about important national crisis telephone lines, and today there's even a national crisis text line. And I truly believe suicide prevention is everyone's business. Here are the most common myths. The idea that it occurs on a whim rarely, if ever, happens. The person who died by suicide has traveled the wrong road. There have been many ups and downs, and this is something they have been thinking about for a while. Suicide is not destiny. It is not inherited. Let me quote Voltaire, 1764. The young man in a fit of melancholy who died by suicide might have simply wanted to live had he merely waited a week. I think you can see what everybody's job is. Help somebody get through a difficult few hours, a difficult day, and there just might be a glimmer of hope. And yes, there is a relationship between bullying and suicide. I've been involved in a number of legal cases where the parents sued the school, claiming that we told you our kid was being bullied, you didn't do anything about it, that's why he or she killed themselves. So what's the research actually say? Strong association between bullying and suicide. But it's almost impossible to rule out other factors, such as child abuse, living in poverty, and mental illness, to name a few. So strong association, yes, but the literature does not show a causal relationship. There also is a relationship between suicide and self-injury. In fact, there are actually estimates that about 30% of the young people that engage in purposeful, moderate, superficial self-injury, such as cutting and burning, ultimately actually make a suicide attempt. So we need to realize those young people also could be at risk. Perhaps the most important data I can share with you today is done by the Center for Disease Control every 2 years. They survey large numbers of high school students. They ask them a lot of questions about at-risk behavior. I only have time today to share the most recent results about suicide. 17.7% said they considered it in the last 12 months. 14.7% made an actual plan, and sadly 8.6% made an actual attempt in the last 12 months. Let's put that in perspective. Looking out my office, I can almost see a public high school of 2,000 students. What's this actually mean? Our best data would indicate 172 of them that walked into that building this morning made an attempt in the last 12 months. Who's the most likely to make an attempt tomorrow? That would be the student with the previous history. And the most frustrating thing for me, the vast majority of the time, their teachers, their parents, school counselors have no idea who these students are. It's the friends that always know about suicidal behavior. But unfortunately, adults have not talked to those friends about what to do, how to help yourself, or how to help your friend if they have made suicidal comments or giving away prized possessions or making out a will. I'm very proud to tell you that I worked on a project with my wife, a former principal for the state of Texas. We wrote the Suicide Safer School Plan for the state of Texas. We looked at the legislation that they have in Texas, which frankly we really do not have in the state of Florida. We reviewed the education codes, and we made recommendations for suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention. And by the way, that word postvention has become synonymous with after a suicide, helping everybody concerned with their shock, their confusion, their grief, and sometimes their guilt. And postvention is actually a time to prevent further suicides. I talked earlier about this relationship does exist between bullying and suicide, and I'd like to share with you a really important resource. That is the Suicide Prevention Resource Center. sprc.org. They tell us the best programs for suicide prevention, which ones are evidence-based, and they wrote a brief about bullying and suicide. There are a couple things I'd like to ask everybody who's listening today to think about. First of all, if you were to visit the school district website where you reside and put in that search engine suicide prevention, I would hope something would come up about the warning signs, what to look for, what to do, who to contact at school, as well as national crisis hotline numbers like 1-800-SUICIDE. I'd also like to ask you to think about inquiring as to whether your county school system actually has a suicide prevention task force, and how can we link school efforts with mental health, medical personnel, county and state initiatives for suicide prevention. And in our schools, we should never hesitate. If we know a student is the victim of bullying, we should ask them about thoughts of hopelessness, giving up, and contemplating suicide. Also very important that we have policies and procedures in our schools to notify parents. I've also been involved in a number of lawsuits where school personnel did not notify parents when they had significant reasons to believe that the child was suicidal. Parent notification is essential. There's actually only one exception. You believe a kid is being abused, now you're calling the Department of Children and Families. Otherwise, document, make a referral, and get a supportive reaction from the parents. When we have a student who's been hospitalized because of depression and suicide, we obviously need a reentry program when they return to our schools. By the way, my plan today is to talk to you about this important topic until about 5:30, see what questions you might have, and then turn it over to one of my colleagues who's a professor in our forensic program. And I'm really pleased to tell you that with my colleague, Dr. Flemons, we actually do a forensic online course about suicide in our society. We also do a second online course about school violence. And frankly, there's a connection between school violence and suicide. The studies done by our Secret Service identified that 2/3 of all school shooters were actually suicidal. Please don't misunderstand and think that most suicidal individuals are thinking about harming other people. They are not. But many homicidal individuals are also planning to die by suicide. Here are those warning signs that I mentioned earlier, and I mentioned a few of these already. By the way, exposure to suicide has been added as a risk factor. Think of it this way. When a suicide occurs, it's like throwing a rock into a pond, the ripple effect, the schools, the community, and the churches. That ripple effect when a young person's suicide occurs is greater than ever before today. And frankly, I think you all know why. That would be because of social networks today. I'd like to ask everyone to keep up with the best practices and what are the current trends, as unfortunately more and more middle school students are turning to suicide attempts and they're using hanging as the method. I'd also like to highlight perhaps the best program that has come across in decades. That is depression screening. And lots of information about depression screening is available at the website mentalhealthscreening.org, which gives you the specifics for the program Signs of Suicide. I'm very proud to tell you I'm on their advisory board. It is a middle school and it is a high school program. So what is Signs of Suicide? Two key components. Very well done videos with the motto, acknowledge, care, tell. Peers, as well as school staff, detect that someone is suicidal and they get them help. The second component is a brief 7-item questionnaire about depression, hopelessness, joy of life, and thoughts of suicide. The young people answer the questions, they turn it over and they score it, and they know whether or not they need to talk to a mental health professional today. SOS is listed Best Practices Registry 1, evidence-based, at the Suicide Prevention Resource Center. And I hope those of you listening will check out their website. I would be remiss today if I did not talk about suicide with regards to gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender youth. Their suicidal thoughts and attempts 2 or 3 times at a minimum more than the heterosexual population. By the way, it has nothing to do with sexual orientation. It has everything to do with rejection and lack of support they get sometimes from the people closest to them. And by the way, the single greatest protective factor for a GLBT youth is having acceptance from their parents and their families. I'd want to know, well, what are the protective factors? According to the World Health Organization, here they are. Don't we wish every kid lived in a stable family? And by the way, whether there's a divorce or separation or not, those parents need to realize they brought this child into the world together, and they need to get along and communicate and support that child forever, regardless of what their differences might be. Coping and problem-solving skills are critically important to prevent suicide and to be able to deal with the ups and downs and the disappointments and humiliation that all of us experience at some point in our life. So it's important not only to have this positive view of ourselves, but also to have a positive connection to school. In fact, I could summarize the most comprehensive study of adolescent behavior in our country's history in one sentence. School connection is the key to everything for an adolescent. And I might honestly tell you, I'm concerned about massive high schools and the question of whether or not every student feels connected and sincerely feels like somebody cared whether they showed up today at school or not. Other protective factors, having a good relationship with other young people. But I might ask you, if there's a young man or a young woman that's pretty disturbed, who are they likely to turn to for help? I might argue they're probably going to turn to another disturbed young person. And between the 2 or 3 of them, they don't know the importance of getting adult help when somebody is talking about being suicidal. And removing the lethal means is critically important around the world to suicide prevention, and making sure that all of our young people have access to mental health care. Religion is a wonderful protective factor, whether it's the church, the synagogue, or the mosque. And we need school environments that promote and emphasize social and emotional well-being, not just academic performance. And as a psychologist who worked in schools full-time for 25 years, I might even argue the key thing about being successful academically in school is to feel safe, valued, and to feel connected to your school. There are critical questions, and by the way, we could have an entire webinar on suicide assessment, but here are the most critical questions, and everything in the literature says you must be direct. You need to ask, are you thinking about suicide now? Tell me, have you ever attempted suicide before? How would you end your life? By the way, I asked a young man in Houston who was suicidal, tell me, how would you do it? How would you kill yourself? He said, I'm going to jump off a cliff. Well, I don't know if you've ever been to Houston, Texas, but it is very flat. It's almost like South Florida. There isn't a cliff for hundreds of miles. Obviously, I asked him a lot more questions, and I did call and notify his parents. But maybe not quite with the same urgency, is the kid who said, I'll tell you how I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to shoot myself with the .38. I had it out last night. I pointed it at my head. It is waiting for me in my room. Can you see how I'm never going to let that student out of my sight? I'm going to hand him off to parents, law enforcement, or mental health treatment. And I'm going to document that I have notified the parents. They're going to conference with me at school, and I'm going to ask them to sign an emergency notification form. Now, I'm continually surprised at how many people in the helping profession are not aware that no suicide contracts have been sorely criticized. First of all, they don't protect us from liability, but they've really been criticized because the client or the student might feel coerced to sign it. They also focus on what not to do, where a safety plan focuses on, and it's done jointly with our client or the student. What ideas do you have? How can we keep you safe? Let's write these down. Let's make sure you have the National Crisis Helpline number. Who can you contact? What can you do to keep yourself safe? I'm going to talk just for a few minutes about something that I've been working on for years, but here is the most challenging case I'm currently working on. And I will actually be in contact with school staff from Academy 20 in Colorado Springs again tomorrow. One high school, a high school of only 1,000 students, had 5 students die by suicide last spring alone. This is clearly what is called suicide contagion or a cluster, and unfortunately adolescents are more likely than any other age group to imitate suicidal behavior. So what has been done for Academy 20 and at Discovery Canyon High School? First of all, I've been involved extensively. I've made multiple trips there. I've talked on the phone with them extensively. We are planning a series of 5 webinars for the district. We also provided meetings for parents, training for staff, including 3 hours for all school administrators. If you had asked me what is the single group in the schools that we must reach to increase suicide prevention efforts, that would clearly be school principals and superintendents. Sometimes they're simply not on board. So it's not enough to train the teachers, not enough to train our counselors, school psychologists, and social workers. And most importantly, schools need to link with community resources. In the last trip to Colorado Springs with my partner, Rich Lieberman, we facilitated the El Paso County Suicide Prevention Coalition meeting with law enforcement, mental health, hospitals, clergy, survivor groups, and the county coroner as well. So here are a few of the things that I've already mentioned that have taken place in terms of trying to prevent further suicides for the Academy 20 school district. Schools today are actually eligible for a grant from the U.S. Department of Education. It's called Project SERVE, Schools Emergency Response to Violence. One thing about my background is that I have personally responded to 15 different school shootings. And I was aware that Congress had appropriated money for the aftermath of school violence. But about a decade ago, I called up the U.S. Department of Education and said, Millard West High School in Omaha has had 4 suicides this spring. Can they qualify for SERVE grant funding? The question was, can you make the case, Scott, that these 4 suicides at one high school, has that impacted learning? Obviously it has. So for the last decade, schools have been eligible for these Project SERVE grants. Right here in Florida, I helped Volusia County get some of those grants after contagion in Daytona Beach, Florida. Here's a quote that I think is really important. It comes from really a national expert at Columbia, Dr. Madeline Gould. These kids died from untreated or undertreated psychiatric illness. Not like it's a mysterious thing. It's not as if it's not preventable. Unfortunately, there's a misperception that if someone wants to die by suicide, it's inevitable. The fact is, the impulse to kill oneself waxes and wanes. When I'm aware of yet another youth suicide, and I got a call today from the state of Pennsylvania, when I'm aware of yet another youth suicide, I think, again, untreated or undertreated mental illness, most likely depression. There have been studies of epidemiology studies, postvention clusters, and contagion studies, and here's what they've found. Extreme academic pressure has contributed. Lack of parental recognition of mental health problems and depression. Their reluctance to get mental health support for their children. Substance abuse, harassment and bullying of GLBTQ youth. And our research has actually found, unfortunately, schools underestimate the impact of a youth suicide. Their efforts are too short in duration and focus on too few students. I'd like to call your attention to what I believe is the best resource ever developed for guidelines for postvention after suicide. This is available at no charge from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and the Suicide Prevention Resource Center. And yes, I was one of the contributors, and we are currently working on a revision. But anybody who works in schools, I would urge you, go online and download this important document. And perhaps the very first statement here will surprise you. But the 36 of us that wrote this document simply said, all the deaths of young people should be treated the same. If you flew the flag at half-mast for the kid who's killed in a car accident, if you have a little bench out front for the kid who died of cancer, you've set a precedent, and you should do that for the suicide victim as well. At the same time, you're focusing on untreated or undertreated mental illness. Always emphasizing help is available. Monitor the social networking sites so you have a good idea of how your student body is coping in the aftermath of the suicide. It's also been problematic to say that we absolutely can have no small memorialization on school grounds. It's challenging to strike a balance between going on with the fundamental purpose of school, which is education, but also supporting the distraught young people and realizing this is the time for education and prevention of further suicides. This journey about postvention begins and ends with prevention, and no single agency or entity can stop a suicide cluster. And that's why I described to you for Academy 20 in Colorado Springs, they know it's going to take the entire village working together. And I'd like to highlight just a couple of things quickly before I see what questions might be coming in, and please share those questions with Gregory Gale. First of all, this is my most recent book. It's the 5th one. There is my personal email, and there is the website for the Suicide and Violence Prevention Office here at NOVA. What would you find there? You'd find an awareness video, an assessment video, a postvention video. You would find a video that I did for the state of Florida looking at the relationship between non-suicidal self-injury and suicide, critical insight and testimony from 2 incredible young women who talked about their history of cutting behavior. You'll also find our most recent newsletter that has articles about LGBT and suicide, as well as links to other webinars that Dr. Flemons and I have done on bullying and suicide, in particular a webinar that I did for the state of Pennsylvania as they're implementing suicide prevention in schools. But I'd like to close my comments quickly with a success story. Young man was living in southwest Houston with mom and stepdad. They divorced. Let's call him Tom. Tom was upset about that. He said, I'm going to go live with my dad. I'm going to go to Jersey Village High School. His mom laughed. Your dad isn't going to take you in, but he did. And Tom was a new student in one of our schools. And by the way, initially things went pretty well. He had a girlfriend. I'm going to call her Cheryl. Tom was balancing living with dad for the first time in more than a decade. He gets a job. He's going to school. He's got a girlfriend. Then an old habit of substance abuse came back. Cheryl tried to tell him, I'm not going to have a substance abusing boyfriend. One day he skipped work to get high. His employer found out about it, fired him. Now he bounces a few checks. He can't pay for the repairs on his truck. Then Cheryl broke up with him on a Sunday night. He took all the aspirin that were in the bottle. Luckily the next morning he woke up. Dad said to me later, I said, Tom, do you have a virus? Are you sick? Can I take you to the doctor? Tom said, no, Dad, I'll be okay. Over the next few days, Tom really wasn't in his classes. He wasn't taking pride in appearance. He was making some statements about death and dying. He was driving recklessly. Cheryl couldn't quite put her finger on it. But on Thursday of that week, because she was worried, she opened up his locker. She found the suicide note that was addressed to her. Now the literature says our adolescents hesitate. They try to handle this on their own. They delay in notifying adults. Cheryl knew better. 10th grade health class, they covered this. She went immediately to the principal's office. They searched the school. He was nowhere to be found. The principal could have said, oh, we'll check on it tomorrow. Instead, he said, you must know where he lives. We're going to go to his house right now. Turned to someone and said, call Scott Poland, call Tom's dad. We're going to all meet at his house. When we got there, I think Tom had just arrived. And what was his plan? I was going to finish the whiskey, then I was going to take the gun, and I was going to kill myself. Thankfully, that didn't happen. He got inpatient for a couple of weeks. He got outpatient for a couple of months. And by the way, did he ever get back together with Cheryl? Absolutely not. But he thanked her. He thanked all concerned. You know, more than a decade has passed, but I happened to run into Tom's school counselor who was involved that critical day. And after all these years, I remembered every aspect of that day vividly. That kid Tom, whatever happened to him? Have you ever seen him? She said, as a matter of fact, I have. I saw him in the grocery store a few weeks ago. He got married. He's got two of the cutest little girls. Now, if he were to call in or send us a message today, would he tell us his life's wonderful? I doubt it. He'd simply tell you, I'm glad to be alive. And by the way, the intervention of any one person can make all the difference in the world. And I want to see what questions you have before I turn it over to Dr. Pan. And my key point that I'd like to say today is inquire of the school district where you reside. Visit the website. What will you find there about suicide prevention? Do they have a suicide prevention task force? If they don't, ask them why not. Back to you, Gregory.
Thank you, Dr. Poland. We do have a series of questions for you. The first one is there a difference in the suicide rate between female and male youth?
Yes, the rates are higher for male youth in terms of actual deaths by suicide, more attempts by females.
Okay. There's another question concerning religion and suicide. It says religiosity was mentioned in your protective factors, albeit certain religious environments that do not accept LGBT people can that exacerbate the feeling for suicide? What would you say to someone who is stuck in that environment?
Well, it greatly saddens me that all of our religious institutions do not support that population. And religion is a place to be connected with other people, to really be embraced. And when that is not happening, I certainly believe that could be a contributing factor.
Another question, is there any difference in terms of suicide between high school students and college students?
It is the second leading cause of death for both of those age groups, unfortunately.
Okay. If there is a suicide in the family, are other members of the family likely to be suicidal?
It is certainly something that is not inherited. It is not destiny. However, it can run in families. Certainly, it's very powerful modeling. And how do we prevent it from running in families? We do that by obtaining mental health treatment and supporting everyone in the family. And when a suicide occurs, that person has traveled a long road. There's no one person, there's no one thing, there's no simple answer, and there's no one to blame.
Okay. We do have one other question, and it's a long one. My friend's parents are currently in the process of divorcing, and my friend conveys to me that her mother has verbalized suicidal ideas, stating that she would be better off dead. From what I gather, her mother demonstrates traits of bipolarism that have never been formally diagnosed. What advice should I give her? I do not believe that she's undergoing therapy or treatment.
Well, obviously, a young person is in a difficult position trying to get mental health treatment for their parent. But at the very least, make sure they are aware of the National Crisis Helpline, maybe convince the parent to at least talk about this with their physician. Maybe they're comfortable with that, and hopefully the physician will be able to make a referral because this person needs mental health treatment.
I believe if there are no other questions, Dr. Poland, I believe there are no other questions. And so should anyone have other questions after this presentation, would you be receptive to receiving them?
Absolutely. And I want to turn it over to Dr. Pan, who's going to talk about the forensic program where I really enjoy teaching my 2 online classes.
Okay. I have one final question before you go. I heard that depression is an underlying symptom that indicates suicidal tendencies. I'm concerned that I'm seeing a growing addiction to digital devices. Are there any research connecting addiction to handheld devices, depression, and suicide?
I'm really not aware of that specific research, but I think we do need to be concerned if somebody is completely withdrawing from family and friends and spending all of their time online. But I think very importantly, we need to be looking at, exactly what are they viewing online, what video games are they playing, whether or not, and hopefully there would be some healthy aspects to those, but if there's not, then that would add to my level of concern. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Poland.
You are very welcome.
We now transition to Dr. James Pan, who is going to be talking to us about our Master of Science in Forensic Psychology. Dr. Pan.
Exactly. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Poland, so much for a great talk, a lot of information in there. And so this presentation will actually be posted when we're done. And so I know that we went through quite a bit, but also you have the PowerPoints you can download when you first logged in. but the presentation will also be posted on our website for the master's program. So real quick, I'm going to go through the master's program in the Master of Science in Forensic Psychology here at Nova Southeastern University in the College of Psychology. It is basically a two-year program. We have students taking 36 credits. It's 12 courses, about 2 courses a term. The program has been around since 2012. We've graduated close to about 100 students so far. And it focuses on the intersection, kind of like we're talking about here, the intersection between psychology and they do this in their class, actually, Drs. Poland and Flemons, in their 2 classes. But the relationship between psychology and different legal facets or legal issues. So we learn in the program, we teach our students how forensic psychology is used and how to apply it in a variety of contexts. Okay, the program, fortunately, it's very flexible. It's offered online. It's a non-clinical program, but it's offered to essentially to engage, to get students who are working professionals who want to integrate a graduate training in psychology and forensic psychology with their job responsibilities, and it's offered in a very flexible, again, format. Within law enforcement and corrections, there's a huge amount of growth, more so than the average in terms of occupations, and there's more opportunities available when you have graduate training in psychology or in related fields. And we see our students in our program, they specialize in law, mental health, or other health services, and they want to know more about forensic psychology, and they want to work in some capacity within forensic psychology, so that's where they typically get the master's degree. The majority of our graduates will begin or continue to work in areas where both psychology and criminal justice intersect. This includes courts, law enforcement, criminal justice, prison, social services, child welfare, dependency, treatment facilities, and so forth. The program allows for career development and helps students become more eligible for, once done, eligible for more senior level positions. Also, making more competitive for when applying for a doctoral program. The program actually fulfills the prerequisites for the clinical program here at Nova, the clinical PhD and PsyD program. There's some prerequisites. The program fulfills those prerequisites. Okay. There are 8 foundational courses included here. You can see the titles. An intro class, psychopathology class, a methods and tools class of psychological violence assessment, a research course. So there are 4 of those, and then the other 4 are, there's an ethics class, a best practices class in terms of how to work with mentally ill in the criminal justice system, gender violence, and then communication skills, tools, and expert witness testimony. We have 2 different tracks, right? And first track, forensic psychology in the legal system, there are 4 electives. There are several classes you can select from, but there are 4 required electives from that track. And here's 3 of the classes that are offered. They're all listed actually on our website. There's more information and some videos there as well, so I encourage you to go there. Psychological issues, dependency and family law, therapeutic jurisprudence, problem-solving courts, and behavioral criminology. We just had the judge who teaches that course, the therapeutic jurisprudence course, do a webinar recently, last month. So, and then tons more, more electives as well. Now for the other track, for the forensic psychology for mental health workers, first responders, and disaster teams, again, 4 electives you need to choose from, and those include suicide prevention, crisis intervention, trauma-informed assessment and intervention, police psychology. There's more. Those are just a few examples. Right? Our students seem to be especially interested in those. There is a capstone requirement at the end of the program. You'll do a capstone, which will be a field experience or a thesis. Students who tend to do the thesis tend to be more interested in going on to get a doctoral degree. Right. We have preeminent faculty, just like Dr. Poland, as an example, full-time adjunct faculty, forensic psychologists, judges, attorneys, working in the courts and corrections, doing competency restoration, expert witnesses, former FBI agents, those who work in private practice doing assessment and treatment, as well as those who work within higher education teaching. The teaching format, again, offered online. We use Blackboard, GoToMeeting, just kind of like what we're doing right now, go to training, go to meeting, use GoToMeeting. We'll have chats typically. Some classes will have them as much as once a week. They're recorded chats. There's required readings, materials that are posted, discussion boards that are utilized to facilitate conversations, ongoing learning, and between the students and the instructor and within the students as well, because our students have a lot to offer each other. We use various assignments and exams also as part of the learning process. All right, and usually we're, like I mentioned before, about 6 credits a term, right? So that's 2 classes a term, 2 years to complete the degree on average is what we're saying, and you take classes both in the fall, or all 3 in the fall, winter, and summer. And you can be in the program for up to 5 years to complete it if you want to kind of take your time. Okay. So
I will take it over, Dr. Pan. Again, everyone, my name is Gregory Gale. I am the Director of Recruitment and Admissions, and in the next few minutes I'll just walk you through the application process. I'm just going to make this very simple. Everything that I'm about to tell you is located on our website, which is psychology.nova.edu. Our hope is that once you have decided on this particular program, and what I'm going to do is actually show you my screen. Once you've decided on this particular program, we will actually help you to apply for admission and walk you through the application process. So we're very excited that you are here. So the first thing that I will do is, if I can, having some technical difficulties here. The first thing you should know is that we admit students 3 times per year in the fall, winter, and summer terms. And winter for us is what other schools call the spring term. Once you know that you'd like to apply for admission, you would go online and you can apply at any time. We have an application fee of $50 that's required as part of the application process. Require that you submit 2 letters of recommendation from faculty or individuals who can attest to your ability to be successful in graduate school. We would require that you submit your academic transcripts. We do look at your bachelor's degree in order to make an admissions decision. The emphasis is placed on your coursework. We'd like you to have at least a 3.0 or higher for admission. Obviously, if you also have a master's degree or a graduate degree, we would require that you submit those transcripts as well. We do require that you submit personal statement, and that's a way for you to tell us why you're interested in the program. What are your professional goals, and why do you want to earn this particular degree? And we require that this statement be around 500 words long. The deadline date for the application are listed on your screen, and what that means is we'd like you to submit your application on or before these deadline dates. If you're an international student, that is, if you're a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, or not a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, we have a separate track for you to follow, and you would start by actually working with our International Students and Scholars Office. You would submit all your required documents to the address that's listed on the screen. We also give individuals the ability to submit electronic transcripts as well to expedite the application process. We also have a team of individuals at our university who are here to help you financially prepare for your graduate education. It's called our Office of Student Financial Assistance, and their website is listed there. This office can help you with scholarships, academic scholarships that are both located on campus and off campus, grants based on your ability to, your financial ability to pay. We have student employment, so graduate students are eligible to work on campus. Anyone who's in a veteran status, we have a team of individuals to help you transition from veteran life to civilian life. We also can provide you with information on loans as well as payment plans. We welcome your questions concerning the ability to pay at our university. We have a wonderful office on campus that you can come on campus and sit down and talk to a professional. You can also call us, or you can obviously visit us online. If you have any questions about our program, the contact information is on your screen. So you were listening just a while ago to Dr. Pan, and his email address is listed there, and that Dr. Lenore Walker is also a professor within the program, and her contact information is listed there. So if you do have any specific questions about the College of Psychology, our information is listed on your screen. And if you do have any other questions, we are available right now to answer your questions. So if you'd like, you can use the chat box and submit your questions, and we are going to be here to answer those questions. Dr. Pan, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful. Okay. So, Dr. Pan, would you mind telling us what courses you teach?
Sure. I teach the research methods class, and so there's also some program evaluation that's covered in it as well. So that's the course I teach. Yep.
Okay. And tell us sort of why you fell in love with forensic psychology.
Well, I've been interested in it for quite a while, and I think the biggest thing is just the opportunity to make an impact and draw in our expertise that we have to offer in psychology into different legal settings, and saying legal setting in the broadest way. I mean, from what we can do in specialty courts to working with prison populations to kids who are involved with dependency court, foster care, all these sorts of things. So to police psychology, I mean, it's all very compelling. It's right where psychology belongs.
And if someone should have questions after this webinar, what is the best way to communicate with you?
You can just email me, or you can call me, but Pan, P-A-N-N, @nova.edu, as you showed before, and then my office number, you can give a call to that, 954-262-8155 as well. So, okay. Whatever you prefer.
Okay, wonderful. So it is now 6 p.m. And I don't see any other questions. So thank you so much for participating in this webinar. Dr. Pan, do you have any final thoughts before we end our webinar?
No, that's it. We had a great session. Thanks, Greg, and Chris also for helping out with this. And I look forward to hearing from anyone with questions, comments, or anything at all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And as Dr. Pan said, this webinar was recorded, so we will be placing it on our website in the next few days. Thanks so much, and you guys have a good evening.